All right, welcome, welcome. This is our Carvel community meeting and today is let me check, the 16th of June of 2022. Thank you all for coming, for being here live or for watching us from the coziness of your home or somewhere else. I don't know. So we meet every day today, that's Thursday, and it's at 10:30 Pacific time. And this is like an opportunity for you to come in and just talk with the maintainers and see what we're working on. And if you have any questions or anything, if you want to, just feel free to pop in. We are a very nice community. We really like talking to people. So if you want to come to join us on this community meeting, or else if you are more into a typing, we also have our Carvel channel in the Kubernetes Slack. Then feel free to join us there. Or if you want to just spread the news about Carvel, we also have Twitter that you can just tag us on and go from there. Okay, so before we start every meeting, we'd like to ask you, if you're interacting with us in any way or form, to please read and abide our code of conduct. If you have any topic that you want to talk about during this meeting, we do have a section here on the bottom that says discussion topics, and just add there any kind of discussion topic that you want to get us to talk about, or you have any questions or anything, we'll just jump there and try to get everything. So when you're joining us, please, I just ask you to add your names here so that we know who was present. And yeah, so that's that. So let's get started with our meeting. So let's go started into our announcements. So this week, we do have some blog posts that's coming out. It's going to be how to template concourse pipeline using YTT by Neil. I'm not 100% sure if this is going to happen. Neil is on vacation this week. Does anyone know if this blog post is already added there?
I was looking at the PR. It's not yet merged. It looks like it's in a final state, but I didn't talk with Neil personally, so I'm not sure.
All right. So we'll have to see if it is ready or not. I think we don't have anything for our upcoming. Let me check. For the next meeting, do we have anything? So this is this week of the June 16th. Oh, we do have. So apparently next week we're going to have another blog post from one of our colleagues, Kumari Tanushri, and it's going to be about targeting the practical scenarios, example update deployments when config map is updated. So we'll add that to our community meeting. So if you're willing to and want to participate and want to create a blog post, you feel free to come into this this repository and just create a PR for it, and just add whatever your name, what do you want to talk about, what type of, let's call it medium that you want to do. And as you can see, everybody is doing blogs here except for this vlog person that did some pretty nice content there, and we have some video as well from like a presentation. So feel free, be creative, and we're waiting for your contributions. And if you are not a Carvel maintainer, we have a surprise for you, because if you contribute with a blog post or something on those lines, we have a t-shirt that we'll be more than happy to send it to you. So that's it. Let's move on to our releases. Did any product released this week? I do feel like two of them released this week, right? Like, didn't we got like kapp-controller and secretgen coming out this week?
Yeah.
Anything that we want to add about those releases?
No, I think that happened last week. Didn't it?
This is since last Friday, like last Thursday.
Isn't it 0.9.1?
does anybody want to talk about any of those two releases? Anything exciting that we should be expecting from them?
I would say the most exciting thing is don't use vo.38.0, use vo.38.1. That was the most exciting thing about that release.
I think we did mention already some of the stuff last meeting, but just small recap is secretgen-controller introduced a secret template API that's available, and give us any suggestions on enhancements for that API. And for kapp-controller, we did introduce Joe actually worked on it, feature called package layering that's been also documented. So give it a try or let us know if there's any questions around it.
Well, and the other, maybe there was some like enhanced OpenShift support, right? Like a lot of people in our community might be running OpenShift. They might care that the newest secretgen-controller is better at being run on OpenShift. Is that the case?
That is true. Yes, we did make the deployment of secret-gen to be more similar to kapp-controller, which now both of them should not require any modification for OpenShift. And then the kapp-controller release did also include some enhancements that were put into kapp CLI that also makes things more OpenShift friendly.
All right, thank you all. Does anybody have any question about any of these two releases? Okay, so let's move on and see. Project roadmap. I'm not sure if there was any change. Does anyone is aware of any change about the roadmap that happened in the last week? It was updated in June here.
I think Aaron had updated it for last week, but I don't think it's been updated since.
Sounds good. So let's talk a little bit about the tools and what has been happening this week and what we're thinking about next week. So YTT, who wants to share about continuing on out of the box validation rules?
Yeah, just more of the same. So we're on the later stages of that work, starting to do some exploratory testing around that kind of stuff. So we're looking for another patch release in the experimental mode. So, but this one's going to have a number of those validations. If you look back, not directing usual, but like if someone is watching, you look back a couple of weeks, we actually have a blog post that gives you a quick start, like getting started using an experimental feature in YTT. Encourage you to check that out. And we'll make the announcement once we get that release out there, but it's starting to come together. Looking forward to that.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Anything else on YTT land or any question about this feature? All right. So the only other tool that has been worked on this week, apparently, it has been the image package. So who wants to talk about the image package? I can do it, João. Thank you. So what basically we've been doing on the last week, we've been focusing a little bit on performance because we rolled out a command called describe that shows you all the images that are associated with a particular bundle. But it takes a lot of time for it to churn through all the images and try to find what images, what they are, and try to go through like bundle hopping, bundle to bundle. So we're trying to look if there's like a way we can make it quicker, if there's like any path on the code. So that's basically what we've been working on the last week. Yeah, is there like any other tool that have any, oh, does anyone have any question about this? No? Awesome. So any other tools that people have been working on? Does anyone have any update for us about them?
Maybe the big news in kapp-controller is that we're just about ready to release our ARM support, right? So You don't just have to walk on your feet, you can walk on your arms now.
Thanks for that, Joe.
Isn't that backwards? Like we got off of our arms, we're just on our feet.
I don't know about you, I learned how to walk on my feet, and then walking on my arms came much later. It's an
Oh, I
advanced
guess
skill set.
so. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird. Yeah. You're devolving, Joe.
All right. Okay, so discussion topics. If there's nothing else from like updates and so on, anything that y'all want to discuss? I see package repositories question mark.
You know, I put that in there. I have this coworker who's been spending a lot of time thinking about package repositories. And I thought maybe the community meeting would be a good venue to have that discussion, but I wanted to, you know, check the room's temperature. Maybe, you know, not everybody cares about package repositories in the same way, but maybe that's why it's an interesting topic.
I guess one thing I'd be interested in is like, what are the sorts of things that people are talking about recently regarding package repositories? Like, we have them, and so what would make it a hot topic right now?
So a couple of weeks back, we asked for the community if for people that were interested in talking to us, have some sort of like some user interviews to better understand how people are using package repositories. Because we are trying to address a particular problem that we currently see in kapp-controller, where if you keep adding packages to a particular package repository, the bundle that is associated with a package repository keeps growing, right? Keeps growing, keeps growing, keeps growing. And when you have like a big product that contains like 10 packages that need to be in a particular version, if you bump that product one version up, you have like 10 new packages that point to 10 new bundles, which means that they becomes a very big bundle that needs to be transported between registries. And that has become a problem in some scenarios where people, if they are like in an air-gapped environment, they have to, I don't know, for example, like copy 10 gigabytes of data, and the next release that they do, it might be like 15 gigabytes. And we're trying to better understand that the area and try to understand like how people are using it. And we got some like interesting insights. I was planning on showing them today here, but to be fair, I didn't have like a lot of time to prepare. So I'm just gonna give you more or less an idea of what we got from the user interviews. The biggest takeaways that we got, we talked with a diverse group of people, and we found out that people are using package repositories in different ways. There's not like a unified way. Some people do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and there's not like, let's call it a winner way for using package repositories. Some people, due to the nature of their products as well, they use a package repository as a repositories of disjoint packages where each person can install a package from that repository. So if you think in something like an apt from Ubuntu repository or a yum repository, it's something around those lines. There are people that don't use them at all and just use, for example, like they use a Git repository that contains definitions of the packages or something like that, or they just add the packages by hand on the clusters. There's other people that create what we have known to be called a meta package, that basically it's a package that in itself installs other packages. So if you think about it, for example, we have an application that contains your code, that contains, for example, Postgres database that you want to install. You can create like a meta package that basically creates package installs to install your application plus the Postgres and so on. So that's another pattern that we saw. And there's another pattern that has like multiple gigabytes of assets versus a single application asset. So like there are people that are packaging just one application. So for example, like we talked with RabbitMQ folks, and they just package RabbitMQ, right? And they have a package repository just for packaging to RabbitMQ, sorry. So like there are like different people that are using package repositories in like slightly different ways, but they are all like, they all work for kapp-controller. So yeah, so that's that. What else? The majority of people are using an image package bundle to support the assets. So everything that you have, like the package repository contains like a folder that contains the definition of the packages, and they create an image package bundle with that and provide that as an image package bundle to kapp-controller. Even though kapp-controller does allow you to do this in different methods, like you can provide a Git repository or just a regular OCI image. The people that we talk to tend to use an image package bundle on this. Before I continue, like if you have any questions, just feel free to ask. I feel like I'm just machine gunning everybody here with a lot of information, so feel free to stop me at any given point, okay?
Yeah, I do have a question about that last point. Did you get any indication as to what was motivating folks to choose that repository format over, say, Git?
Yes. So like in the majority of like these scenarios, people have an end goal of an air-gapped environment. So what is an air-gapped environment? It's an environment that does not have access to the internet. So all the images that are associated with your applications need to be somehow copied through a thumb drive, through like a pass through like a machine in the middle or something like that. So they need to copy all these assets, all the OCI images that are related. For example, let's pick up like the RabbitMQ example. That need to copy like the RabbitMQ OCI images to the internal networks. So image package does provide you with simple command, a way to download all the images that are associated with the package repository bundle. It just downloads everything, and you can just copy it to the side and just push it back to the other registry in a seamless way. And this is like a very powerful for these scenarios where you need to copy a big amount of images.
I see. So it's the ability to be able to reference other bundles. It's just isn't available in those other formats. Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
I would, maybe to push on that a little bit, you can still use like a Git repository, right? To store a bunch of package CRs, and those package CRs themselves are bundles, let's say, that somebody made, right? They don't have to be, but let's say they are, and those things could be relocated, right, as well. For me, at least, what I've seen is and encouraged, right, is that a lot of times if you're distributing the assets externally to your, external to your organization, or maybe, within your organization, there's very hard boundaries between, I don't know, business units or something like that, right, or teams. It's useful to capture the asset just kind of holistically, right? And so that's, I would say, the benefit of putting stuff into an image package bundle, where you no longer are depending on a Git repository, right? There is no, you don't have to necessarily figure out how do you provide the Git server or whatever endpoint externally to your users, right? You effectively shifting that problem to something a little bit more maybe commonly exposed or shareable, right? Which is the registry servers, right? So if you're able to, for example, wrap your thing in a bundle, your entire repository, right, then you're able to transfer all of those packages recursively to somebody, right? Versus if you are maybe yourself consuming those packages, or maybe you have a very tight feedback loop between teams and whatnot, there might be just no need to kind of turn the Git repo into a more shippable or transferable asset, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and are there any better guarantees with in a bundle over, say, like a Git repo when you're sharing that the artifact delivered was the artifact produced, or is that equivalent across these types?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It kind of depends on what folks really, consider as equivalent, right? So Git does have a notion of commits, right? And, unless you're really screwing around with Git, then, your commit is kind of seen as immutable, right? But you could, for example, be doing all kinds of force pushing, which then would, remove the commit, or maybe, depending how you're referencing to Git repositories, it might be a little bit kind of a, looser way, right? Like, oh, don't, like, not pointing to a particular SHA, but maybe pointing to just a branch or something, right? Where a branch over time can be modified. So similar things, are available and possible with registries, right? There's obviously a notion of tags. There's a notion of digests, right? And, I think both sides, could be used with, let's say, signing and verification tools, right? So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It becomes maybe more of a and actually maybe another example of it is like, well, in theory, I guess you could also have, as long as you have the source Git repo available, you could, let's say, Git clone something right into your own, I don't know, Git server or something like that, right? So you could be doing all that stuff with, sure there's other ways of transferring assets in similar ways, right? So kind of becomes maybe a preferential kind of a thing, but there is definitely the recursive nature of image package bundle definitely makes it a little easier to transfer all of the dependent child assets, right? Versus in Git, then you would have to, I don't know, you would have to make a list of all of them and copy them as well. I mean, you can still use tooling like, image packaging kbuild, but it's a little bit less natural, I would say.
So it seems like a lot of what the package repository story is air gap first. Is that fair? Like, it's not, oh, there's a central, like if I'm using yum or apt or something, there's a central repository, right? And I'm very literally not air gapped. I'm going out to the network to pull my packages. If I'm using Git, we usually think that there's a central repository, whether it's hosted on GitHub or, just GitHub, really, let's be honest. It's just GitHub now. But right, but like the package repository, what we've said is, well, the whole point is that it's relocatable as a single unit.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely that side of it, though I would, like for Git and for apt and typical other package managers, right? You can set up proxying through, right? And mirrors and et cetera, right?
Yeah, Artifactory.
There becomes a question of, do you really want to do a lot of this extra prep work versus, in a Kubernetes ecosystem, registries are readily available, production grade, can carry a lot of assets, high availability, et cetera, versus like, who's necessarily running a highly available Git server for their own stuff, right? Or, I mean, I guess they could be using a managed service if they really wanted to, but it just seems like registry is becoming more and more of a service or API that's well readily available and quite reliable.
Yeah, pulling that tangent. Yeah, go ahead, Scott. Jump in.
I also I've used both approaches where I have used Git repos with just packages in them, and that's what I usually do in internal development. When I care about the manifests of my actual what is getting deployed because I'm building them. When I'm supplying something to a customer, then they don't need to care about all the nitty gritty. And that's what Git is really good for, to be able to see the different commits, to do Git diffs, to do things like that. When the end user who you're supplying it to needs to care about what the diffs are and things like that, there's a benefit to Git there. When you really want to hide away the implementation detail and just give them an artifact, say, hey, just run this command or install this single YAML and you get RabbitMQ, you get app toolkit from TCE, you get whatever it is, and they don't need to care about what's underneath, then having it in OCI bundle kind of strengthens that approach of I'm giving you a solution. I'm not giving you a bunch of YAML files, I'm giving you a solution. And that seems to also be a separation of how I've been approaching it, at least.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Yeah, that is. I was going to push on the other side of that, which is, and I don't know if I'll get my facts straight here. I do know that in most OCI registries, there's some intelligence around blobs that are identical, are shared or can be shared, but that in Git that's not necessarily true. So I know disk is cheap, but I wonder if like there's a difference there in terms of over time, a Git repo would grow much larger than its corresponding OCI registry holding the same content. Is that even a factor?
In the end, you need the OCI images to run the applications in Kubernetes, right? And that's where the bulk of the size comes from. Yes, definitely you're right. Like the blobs can be shared between between two images. Blobs can be shared, but in here, like the smallest part of any bundle is, or these package repos, or even if the packages is the configuration themselves, because they usually, what you have on the OCI image that represents the bundle is basically YAML. So in some sense, having it in Git versus that will change every time. So there's no reusage of blobs, or having it in Git in terms of like disk space, it doesn't make a lot of difference. Maybe it gets smaller in Git because Git only has the diffs, while for the OCI images, there's no idea of diff, it's always a new thing.
I also always don't only view relocating as a use case for air gapped. There's a huge use case for it just due to network latency and things like that. When pulling an image, instead of pulling from Docker Hub where I may get rate limited, or even just pulling from the internet, if I'm pulling a lot of images, I'd rather pull that from a local registry that's within my network that I'm not going to be using huge network bandwidth to pull down, and things will be much quicker.
Yeah, plus one to that. If anything, for me at least, running production environments is really about risk management, right? And so how do you eliminate as many external dependencies as you can so that you have less things to worry about?
Yeah, and how many times this year has Docker Hub, GCR, or Quay, or GCR gone down? The answer is probably multiple times for everyone. I know Quay, it's been like 7 or 8 times this year, and GHCR, I've had it go down twice on me this year. Projects registry VMware.com has gone down on me multiple times this year. So having your own is beneficial.
Well, yesterday I was trying to read about how to cache those assets in your GitHub tests, because we have enough third-party dependencies just in our test suite that it gets flaky when things go down. Yeah, definitely.
All right, cool. Thanks for all the input here. So if we roll back a little bit, back to our findings, we've been talking a lot about Git, and people use Git a lot. And one of the usages that they have for Git is to store their packages. So the configuration, like the YAML that represents the package in Git repositories, and then they use pipelines like Argo or Concourse or something like that to generate the assets for the package repository. And when there's like a new version of a particular package, people really like to have the ability to do a pull request or a merge request, depending on the Git that you're using on the server side, and have like that control, and have like everything in some ways automated. we talked to the RabbitMQ team. They have like a pipeline where they just press a button in a pipeline. It just bumps a minor version of RabbitMQ and just generates YAMLs for them and does pretty interesting stuff. So that's also people are using. That was something that we found out. People are using Git to store the base of their package repository. So like store the information that then will be generated. Another thing that we found out is that people start constructing some norms, let's call it, around how can you define which versions of each software you want to provide on a particular release of the bundle, the package repository. They have like YAML files. They have some scripts that read those files and just select which versions they have, because a lot of people save in their Git like multiple versions of the same software. So let's imagine RabbitMQ, you have like 10 versions of RabbitMQ, but you just want one of them to be part of your package repo. So they have like these mechanisms. We saw two, like just to wrap this up, we saw something interesting, that there are like kind of two poles here of people. There are people that when they create their packages, they just open the door and say like, just customize whatever you want on our package. It's like, it's pretty open. And we had people on the other side of the spectrum where they're like, this is the package, you don't have customizations to do there, because we want things, for example, to be reproducible, and to make sure that like they have like the minimum amount of customization available. So like we saw like some big disparities here. It was interesting. It's more like an interesting fact than really something that we are going to leverage on something. But I think it was interesting to see like that. Even like we talked with six different users and like have like this discrepancy. It was pretty interesting. So yeah, and we got some like general feedback that we eventually in time are going to try to synthesize in a better way that will like cause us to have some features in some of the tools that we got some feedback on. So this was very package repository related, but we got feedback from like other tools, like the majority of them, like image package, or eventually like some K-control and kapp-controller itself, not only on the package repository concept itself. So it was interesting, and thank you all for participating on this user interviews with us. It was some fun times. Okay, does anybody have any other questions or anything that they'd like to know about this topic? Okay, so is there any other topic that y'all want to talk about? There's an X there. Not sure what that represents in terms of discussion topics.
I think that's just simply.
Yes, the end of list indicator.
Please add your theme here and replace my X.
Your null character for your list.
All right. So before we close shop for today, anybody has anything they would like to get out of their chest before we close? No? All right. So thank you all for joining us in our community meeting today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're seeing it in your home and you want to join us next week, we'll be open again next week. So come and join us. We'd love to talk to you and to see what you're doing with Carvel. So thank you very much, and I'll see you next week.